Hi there, I'm Bennett Haeberle. I'm the investigative reporter here at NBC Chicago. I wanted to talk to you about our latest investigation, which deals with sexual assault here in Chicago. And our reporting does touch on instances of sexual violence. So if that's something that's triggering for you, this is a heads up. What we found over the course of 6 months was that sexual assaults and other sex crimes in Chicago rarely lead to an arrest and almost never lead to a sex crime conviction with prison time. And the net result of this is that it can leave crime victims feeling just like the charges themselves. Dismissed.
Okay. Not only have your actions affected me directly, but they have rippled throughout my life.
She asked us not to use her real name, but this is her story.
I carry your violation with me daily. I can't ask for a new body. Although there were certainly days that I wish I didn't exist.
The woman we'll call Jane agreed to read her victim impact statement from her own sexual assault.
One thing I want to make clear to you is that in order to ask for the help and support that I needed to expose the most humiliating and foul experience I've had. Those words are left on my lips, and that is messed up. I was the one repeating the names you called me. I was the one that had to recall how many times I said no.
Her story is one of thousands of reported sex crimes that NBC5 Investigates examined and found they almost never lead to a conviction. They're often dismissed from court records, but not from the minds of survivors.
He stole from me what he didn't have a right to take from me.
And change needs to happen with the input of survivors.
As part of our reporting, we spoke to scores of survivors, including many off-camera, all of whom said they were unhappy with the outcomes of their cases. We found of the more than 21,000 victims who reported sex crimes, police made arrests in fewer than 1,600. That's just 7%. Once in court, the numbers plummeted even further. All told, in a 6-year period, just 1.5% of all reported rapes and other sex crimes in Chicago resulted in a sex crime conviction with prison time.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, I think the research and data tells us that sex crimes are one of the most underreported of all crimes.
We shared these findings with State's Attorney Kim Fox, who told us these cases fail for a variety of reasons.
Oftentimes, these are cases where there are no witnesses, that you have your survivor and the accused. There are occasions where you may have DNA evidence, sometimes you don't. That is often one person's word against another.
In Jane's case, she met a guy on Tinder, an encounter that court records show ended in sexual assault. What she didn't know at the time, she wasn't the first victim.
That shocked me when I found out that he had done this before and that it was virtually identical. Just the whole process of it, using Tinder, same type of sexual aggression, and all of those details were eerily similar.
Christian Valsich was already out on bail on a 2019 case, facing 4 counts of aggravated sexual assault, when court records show he sexually assaulted Jane in May of 2020. At the time, the court had already barred him from using dating apps.
What a bold move for someone to know that they're out on bail for raping and strangling another woman. And, you do it again?
As both cases worked their way through court, there were 2 different outcomes. Valchich eventually pleaded guilty in Jane's case to a single count of criminal sexual abuse. But in the other case, Valchich pleaded down to a single count of aggravated battery.
Is the watering down to something that's not a sex crime, is that just?
Again, if we can get accountability, if it's a not guilty versus you have to do some type of sex offender services, if it's you just get to walk and it is in essence everything that you've gone through, a judge or jury has said didn't happen at all, versus something else, that's accountability.
I know if I were in the other victim's shoes and that was how it was pled down to me, I think I would feel pretty disregarded.
So the state's attorney's office would not tell us why the sexual assault charges in the other case were dismissed. We simply don't know at this point. Something else that's worth pointing out, a lot of these cases, as they make their way through the court system, die off for various reasons. Some are dismissed entirely, others lead to convictions with very little prison time. There are convictions on other charges which don't require the person to register as a sex offender. There are lots of reasons. Another number we felt was worth pointing out to you, a racial disparity we found among victims.
I try not to think about it. I try not to focus on it because it does damage.
Shelavante Tucker says she is still healing from what happened 5 years ago, a visit to her home from an ex that began cordial, but ended, she says, in rape. He was an armed security guard. She said no, but felt there was no choice.
I didn't fight back because my children were there. And when you have a gun in your windowsill, it's like, if my kids bust in, what can happen next, you know? So I didn't want to put my children's life in danger, you know? So I kind of like submitted to him, you know? I submitted and I gave in to him. And I'm fighting at that point. I lost hope.
In the moments after, he got a call from work and left.
And at that point, I had slid off the edge of my bed, and I just sat like this, balled up, and I was just crying. I was just crying like I didn't know what to do.
She went to the hospital. A rape kit was performed.
It's his word against mine.
While her case led to an arrest, the sexual assault charges against her ex-boyfriend were eventually dismissed. An in-depth analysis by NBC5 Investigates revealed a pattern where Black and Hispanic victims were less likely to see their alleged perpetrators convicted of a sex crime when compared to those who were white. We also found despite 21,000 reported sex crimes in Chicago between 2018 and 2023, very few people were arrested, fewer than 1,600 in 6 years. Once inside the courtroom, the numbers dwindled even further. Just 1 out of every 5 arrests led to a sex crime conviction with prison time. We shared these findings with the state's attorney, Kim Fox.
The net result of that is that these survivors have told us that they feel like an injustice is played out. What do you say to those folks?
You know, as a survivor, I can't tell a survivor how they should feel. So I can't answer what to say to folks who feel that that is not justice for them. They have every right to feel that that's not just. What we try to weigh, again, is having our survivors at the center.
I felt like I was the criminal that was being investigated versus the empathy and compassion that you would think that detectives will have for you when you come forward.
Shelavante said she felt betrayed by the system, let down by prosecutors who she says didn't make it clear why the case fell apart. This is body camera footage of her ex-boyfriend Cortez Fort's arrest. At least one officer appeared to recognize him from his work as a security guard.
He helps us out all the time, yeah.
Officers offered to move Fort, a person accused of sexual assault, out of public view as he was placed in handcuffs.
And we'll help you out the best we can.
Yeah,
So you want I just don't want them back the car up so nobody sees you getting in, or?
Court records allege Fort forcibly removed Shelavante's clothing and threatened her, but a handwritten notation also states that a witness called into question Shelavante's credibility. Fort told police he didn't do anything wrong and eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of kidnapping. The 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault were dismissed. Cortez Fort initially agreed to do an interview, denying the allegations and expressing interest in clearing his name. He was acquitted in a separate domestic case involving another woman. He did not respond to our follow-up attempts to reach him.
We all tend to overestimate the likelihood that an allegation is false.
Northwestern University law professor Deborah Turkheimer is a former prosecutor who has studied and written about what she calls a credibility discount, saying we are hardwired to disbelieve accusers, especially those from marginalized communities.
The testimony or the word of a victim is itself evidence. And often it's not considered evidence. Often it's dismissed as something less than evidence or something that can't be believed.
It hurts me because it's like you tell women and children to come forward, men, women, and children to come forward, but then when we do come forward, it's no justice. none whatsoever.
Once again, the state's attorney's office refused to tell us why the sexual assault charges in this case were dropped, calling it part of their deliberative process. Something else we were curious about: how does Chicago stack up against the rest of the country or other major U.S. cities? What we found is that Chicago isn't alone with this problem.
I would dream about it and I'll wake up screaming at the top of my lungs. Just screaming in anger, rage, heartbroken.
Shelevante Tucker's allegation of rape against her ex-boyfriend died on the vine in court, ending with a plea agreement to a kidnapping charge.
I don't think that justice was served in the way that I thought it was.
In this woman's case, we're calling her Jane, her assailant was convicted of criminal sexual abuse in her case, but not another woman's. It's a crime, Jane says, should never have occurred because her attacker was out on bail, facing 4 counts of aggravated sexual assault when hers occurred. Christian Valsich is now a registered sex offender and was sentenced to 24 months probation. Together, their stories represent just 2 of the 21,000 sexual assaults and other sex crimes reported to Chicago police since 2018. Police made arrests in fewer than 1,600 of those complaints. Once in court, the cases died off by the hundreds. All told, Chicago's sex crime conviction rate that included prison time, just 1.5%. NBC5 Investigates found Chicago's low conviction rate is in some ways among the worst among major U.S. cities. Only Boston and Los Angeles had lower conviction rates for crimes of sexual violence. Hartford, Connecticut, Dallas, and Philadelphia all had higher conviction rates compared to Chicago. Are there things that you wish your office had done better in prosecuting these cases? Are there some that you say, oh, I wish we should have done this?
You know, listen, we have a vertical prosecution method where our prosecutors are on the cases from beginning to end to know their cases, again, the strengths as they come in, the deficiencies that may occur, again, the credibility of our witnesses and walking them through. And so it's difficult to second guess because, again, these are human endeavors, but we're always striving to do better.
Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox says the cases can be difficult to prosecute for a variety of reasons, from a lack of witnesses to prosecutors weighing evidence before deciding if they can prove a sexual assault occurred beyond a reasonable doubt.
This is a problem across the nation. It's called case attrition.
Northwestern University law professor Deborah Turkheimer, a former Manhattan prosecutor, said a host of factors plays into this, including how thoroughly the cases are investigated and prosecuted.
And basically, it is cases dropping out at every stage, and dropping out in large part because people aren't doing their jobs well, right?
Turkheimer says another major factor, victims who don't come forward at all.
And one reason for that, not the only reason, but one reason is what I call the credibility discount and the likelihood that someone will not be believed or will be blamed or will just be disregarded if that person comes forward. And this is something that we see.
Overwhelmingly, it's distressing.
Carrie Ward is with the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault, or ICASA. Do you think the general public is aware that the numbers are so stark?
No. I think the general public would be surprised at what the actual numbers are. What they might not be surprised at is that people aren't always believed when they say they've been sexually assaulted.
While the numbers may be bleak, Ward says there are resources available to help. Specifically, rape crisis centers and hotlines with advocates. But there are fewer around than there used to be. Budget cuts meant advocates were cut too. Offices were closed and communities were left underserved.
And so 5 outreach offices closing, 14 hospitals, most of them here in the city of Chicago, that no longer will have an advocate respond to them. That's the wrong direction.
Ward says their lobbying efforts for more funding will continue in an effort to shore up what's been lost.
We have to say in the state of Illinois, sexual assault survivors mean something to us, sexual assault workers mean something to us, and a community free of sexual violence means something to us. And if that costs us more money in our taxpayer dollars, that's money well spent.
If you've been the victim of sexual assault, we've placed a number of resources on our website. There you can find links to advocacy organizations, extended interviews, other data analytics. And if you have something else you think we should investigate, please feel free to reach out. I'll include links to my social media channels in the description below. Thanks so much for watching.